Hi, this is Wendy from Knitters Brewing, and I'm going to demonstrate some stranded colorwork techniques for you. The ones I'm going to show you today will all involve using two colors in any given round or row if you're doing flat work. And here's an example of the simplest stranded colorwork. This is where just two colors are being alternated. And on the back, what you can see happens is as you're working with one of the colors on the needle, the other color is being carried behind that color. So you can see that for every time I have a dark stitch on the needle, I have the light color passing behind it, and this is called a float. And wherever I've got a light stitch on the needle, I've got a dark float passing behind it. And part of the challenge of color work is keeping those floats at a nice even tension behind the work. It's easy to get them too tight or too loose, and then you might lose like your stretchiness if you have them too tight, or if they're too loose they might hang a bit loose back here and you could catch your finger or something in them if you were making a glove. So part of the challenge, or what takes practice with stranded color work, is managing your floats on the back of the work, keeping them at the right tension and keeping them neat looking like this. I'm going to show you three techniques for doing this type of stranded color work where we're alternating colors, and then we'll move on to a little bit more challenging examples. Now, before I demonstrate this first method, I want to mention the thing that we don't want to do with stranded color knitting. We don't want to just have both of our ends hanging down and first pick up one color and do a stitch with it and then drop that tail, and then pick up the other color tail and knit with it and then drop that tail. That is very inefficient. It'll go crazy slow and you won't like color work. And also, it tends to not yield a nice tension across the work. So what we are going to do here is a couple of techniques that will help your work to be more efficient. The first one is a continental technique where you hold both the colors on your left hand, just like if you were holding one color on your left hand. And to do this one, very simple. All you're going to do is just pick the color that you want the next stitch to be as you're working your way around. And I apologize, I'm in a kind of a funny angle here, so it looks more awkward than it really is. Here we go. And that's all you do. Now, the one thing that's important when you do this is you can see I'm always picking the dark color by going over the top. Now, I could reach underneath to get it, like that, but then my yarn is going to start to twist. And if there's anything you want to do when you're doing color work, it's manage your yarn tails so that they don't turn into a big tangle by the end of your row. So if you're just always picking one from the left and one from the right, your yarn will not tangle as you work your way around the round. And you can see from the back, our floats are looking very nicely managed as we're going around with this method. The next method I'm going to show you uses this little gizmo here that's called a yarn guide or a finger guide. And it is a nice little plastic gizmo that's very inexpensive, and it helps to keep your yarns separated on your fingers so that you can grab them more efficiently. So you'll put your yarns on your hand just the same way you did in my previous example, load them into the yarn guide, and you can see there's enough spaces in here for 4 colors if you want to get that adventuresome. And then you just snap the lid shut on it, and now they can't escape. So let me tighten up my tails here a little bit. And we're just going to do the same thing we did in the previous example. Let me get my needles here. Okay. And I'm going to grab alternating the colors again just the same way. But you can see now the guide helps keep the yarns spread apart a little bit so they are easier to pick up as I'm moving my way around. And again, I recommend always picking them up from the left or the right consistently so that your yarn tails don't get twisted and that your back of your work continues to look very tidy. Now here's the third method that I'd like to show you. This is a method where you hold one color in one hand and one in the other. This is a good method for someone, say like myself, who typically knits by throwing the yarn with their right hand. This minimizes the amount of continental knitting that you need to do stranded color work. So let's show you how that works. So as I go around, I'll knit one with the light color and then using continental style, knit one with the dark color. No finger guide required here since there's only one color on my left hand. But if I was doing a 3-color piece, I could have one color on my right hand and 2 in my left hand using the color guide. Alright, so that flows pretty easily. And again, here's how our back looks, nice and tidy. So that's how we accomplish the alternating 1 and 1 colors. So what do we do if we have more than one stitch of a given color in a row in our color work? Well, the answer to that depends on how many stitches you have. So let me show you some examples here. Now what I'm showing you is alternating 2 of each color, 2 darks, 2 lights, 2 darks, 2 lights. So as you would expect in the back, now you're seeing a little bit longer floats than we saw before. So here's the dark behind the light stitches, here's the light float behind the dark stitches. You can see that they still lay down very nicely across the back. They still look very tidy. So if you have 2 stitches in a row, you do it just the same way as you do if you have 1. You just pick 2 in a row instead of 1 as you're knitting along. So now let's scooch down a little farther here. I've got an example of 3 lights and 1 dark in a row. Okay. Now on the back, again, as you would expect, now the floats are getting a little bit longer. We've got a longer dark float behind the row of 3 stitches. Yet they still seem to lay down pretty nice. You know, this is kind of a gray area here. You know, are you comfortable with that? Personally, I think it's fine. Especially if you're doing a hat or something like that. If it was a glove, I might think differently because I could sort of snag a finger on that as I was putting on a glove, but for a hat, not a problem. For a sweater, not a problem. So I am going to say one of my personal rules is if I have 3 or fewer stitches in a row of the same color, I let the float go behind the back of the work like that. Now if you have more than 3 stitches in a row, then you need to do what's called weaving in the floats. And it's not as hard as that sounds. There's really no actual weaving, but I will now demonstrate that for you. Now I have an example of where we have 4 light ones in a row and then 1 dark. 4 light, 1 dark. On the inside, now you can see these floats are not laying down quite as nicely as they did before. And it's just because they're getting pretty long. You know, they're 4 stitches long now. So this now becomes a problem with your knitting because it gets real easy to accidentally snag one of these. And you can't tighten them up really anymore because then it would pull your work in. It would draw those 4 stitches in a row together if you tried to tighten it up. It has to be as loose as it is so that the work lays nice and flat on the right side. So what we do is called weave in the floats. And down here a little bit farther, I've done an example of that. So here's an example of where we just carry the dark behind the 4 stitches. Here's 3 examples of where I've woven in the float behind the 4 stitches. And you can see it's just kind of tacking it down halfway through the set of 4 stitches. It's essentially wrapping the 2 tails together in the back of the work, and that catches it in there, and now you don't have any big floats. And on the front, it doesn't show at all. Now we don't actually have to stop and put down our yarn tails to wrap them around each other. There's a way we can do it as we knit, and that's what I'm going to show you now. As we work this round, what we're going to be doing is weaving these 2 yarn colors together in the back halfway through this light colored set of stitches. So what we're going to be doing is working the first 2 stitches as we normally would in our previous examples. Then the 3rd stitch we're going to weave the 2 tails together, which I'll show you how. Then in the 4th stitch we're going to go back to working it normally. Then to finish off the sequence we'll work the dark colored stitch as we did normally in our previous examples. So let's see how that works. With the continental method, whether you're using a guide or not, you're going to want to set this up on your finger so that the color that's the most prevalent in the round, which in this case is the light color, is toward the outer end of your finger, and the less prevalent color is on the inside. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to work the first 2 stitches in the light color just as we did in our previous examples. So reaching over the top of the dark color to get to those light colored stitches. Now for the 3rd stitch we're going to twist those tails together as we work it, and to do that we are going to reach under the darker colored stitch, grab the lighter colored tail, and pull it through. Then for the 4th color or 4th stitch we're going to go back to doing it the way we did before, where we reach over the darker colored yarn and grab the lighter one like that. And then finally, to finish off the sequence, we will do 1 stitch in the dark color. And you can see in the back we've got our end woven in back here, and it's a little bit uneven. We're doing more stitches with one color than the other, so that tends to make our tails have a little bit different slack in them, but you can adjust it as you go. So let me show you that one more time. We're working over with our predominant color until we get to the point where we need to do the weaving, and at that point then we reach under the contrast color, grabbing the lighter color and pulling it through. Then to finish out the lighter color section we go back to grabbing from over the top, and then finally we grab the darker color. And that's how we do this in the continental method. Now for the two-handed method. The way we're going to set this up is we're going to put the most dominant color in the right hand and the less prevalent color in the left hand. So same thing, we're going to work 2 stitches as we normally do. We're going to twist it on the 3rd stitch and then work the 4th stitch normally, and then we'll do the contrast. So in this method it looks like this. So you over the dark color for the first 2 stitches. Then to do the twist, we insert and go under the dark color, wrap it and pull it through. Then for the 4th stitch, back to going over the dark color. Then to finish our sequence, we close it out with a dark stitch. And here's our back showing where we captured that dark float in behind the light float right here. So let's see that again. 2 stitches going over the top of the left hand color Now we go underneath the left-hand color for one stitch to cause that weave to happen. One more stitch over the top of the darker color, and then finally one stitch in our last color to get our 4 in 1 sequence. And there we have it. And we still have maintained stretchiness. The more colors we get, or the longer our floats get, the less stretchy it is. So don't be alarmed if you start to lose a little stretch over time. You'll still have some. It just won't be as stretchy as, say, a stockinette area. I want to share one last comment in this video. Here's another project. And in this one, you can see this particular row right here. Here's an example of where we had 7 of the green stitches in a row, followed by 3 tan, 1 green, 3 tan, and another 7 green. So for the 7, just think about it before you start the row. Take a look at what you're going to do and kind of strategize how you're going to do it. For me, I wrapped it on the 3rd stitch and the 5th stitch. And that way I didn't ever have any stretches that were more than 3 stitches long behind this green section. So I did 2 greens, then 1 wrap, 2 more greens, 1 wrap, 1 more green, and then moved on to my tan stitches. So just kind of each time you're going to start a row, think about how you want to strategize wrapping for that row, or if you even need to wrap for that row, and you'll be very successful with it.